His name is Mike.
Uh-huh.
You didn't, but I think he met, he's building a garage for one of your archivists there. I thought it was you, but I guess it isn't, is it?
Right,
Is
right.
he building it, Mike?
Okay.
Yeah. Building a garage, is he building a garage?
Well, he's
or
going
whatever?
to be.
Oh, yeah, well, he's my son, so he,
Oh, really?
yeah.
Oh.
He's a good-looking kid. I know.
Nice fellow. Yeah, because now it's interesting. His girlfriend works with my...
Pam. Yeah.
Right, works with my wife.
Yep, the ultrasound technician. He's the, Oberheim is the one that did my seed implants.
Okay.
My prostate cancer I had. I had prostate cancer and I had a heart attack at the end of August, a minor one. And I'm still around, and you know, it hasn't phased me a bit.
Good for you. Good for
I'm
you.
conditioned, right? Let's face it.
Well, I'll have to mention this to Mike when I talk to him.
I never see him really. You probably see him more than I do. He's busy. He's a contractor. He's got so damn much business that guy has, you know.
Well, that's good. That's good.
Well, I'll give you a buzz when I get the...
Okay. Let's see. We're doing an interview with Mr. Anthony Leone up at Glens Falls Armory, October 11th, 2001. Mr. Leone, where were you born, sir?
I was born in Utica, New York.
Oh, really?
Yep.
About when?
July 23rd, 1925.
Well, I was born in Utica also.
Yeah, you thought, I think someone mentioned that. Yeah.
Did you go to school in Utica?
Yeah, I went to Utica Free Academy, and of course the war broke out. I didn't graduate, and I went back and got my diploma after the war. I went to Syracuse University.
Uh-huh. So you went directly from high school into the service?
No, I worked on the railroad for a while because my mother was dying of cancer. I had to take care of her, and then I did go into service. I was one of the first volunteer draftees. They call you had your choice of the service, and I chose the Coast Guard.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to be an officer on an icebreaker. I hate ice, but I ended up in the amphibs in the Navy, and during war, all the Coast Guardsmen went into the Navy. Of course, we were on the Navy Department. Now they're under the Transportation Department, and they're busy. Coast Guard's spending $1 million a day right now with this terrorist business, patrolling.
Now, where'd you do your basic?
At Manhattan Beach, New York.
What was that like?
It was something new for me. I had never had 3 square meals a day before that.
Really?
I had a clothesline for a belt, and we didn't eat too good. I lived in the ghetto, and it was a potpourri of every kind of race there was, really. But we all got along rather well. We didn't lock our doors, actually, because I think the main reason was that no one had anything to steal. You know, that was a fact. And Jack Dempsey was my athletic instructor. He became lieutenant commander after that. Lou Ambers, another champ. And we took our training there. We learned for the Coast Guard, we rough and tumble and boxing and whatnot. And after that, we went to Corolla, North Carolina, and took our training in the swamps. Corolla, North Carolina. I hate snakes, and these things were going through the water between my legs, and they were firing live ammo over our heads. And a few guys poked their heads up, and they lost them too, you know. And,
really?
Yeah, and they never used us as commandos, Coast Guard commandos. I don't know if you remember, there was a comic strip out at that time, showed this fellow dressed up with a 45 and all, the Phantom. And they were giving us uniforms similar to that for night raids in 45s and all that. That never happened. I ended up on an LST in Norfolk, Virginia. And when I climbed up the gangplank of that 327-foot long landing ship, that was the biggest ship I've ever seen in my life. I said, oh, good God, like the Queen Mary, you know. But after I, spent a little time on it, I realized it was just a little tiny little thing.
What year, now, when did you get on board that?
1940, March 44.
Okay, were you part of the commissioning of that?
No,
No,
it was
you came
commissioned after the commission.
So you're not a plank holder?
No. Then we took our amphibious training down Little Creek, Virginia, and the Chesapeake, and there was anti-aircraft practice. You know, they towed the targets, and we fired at them, and they hit a few of the planes that were towing them. And then we went overseas in March,
What was your duty on board?
Seaman First Class.
Seaman First Class.
Yeah, we were part of the landing party on it, but they never used us for that either. We just, things don't develop exactly the way you plan it, right? So thank God for that. I can't see fighting a German with a bayonet or something, you know. So I was scared to death.
Really?
Oh, yes.
Now, so you were trained as part of a landing party.
Yeah.
And what were they supposed to do?
Well, like any landing party, we went ashore and secured a beachhead. And in this case here, we had LCVPs, two LCVPs that brought the troops in and landed them, then came back in and got more. And this is before the landing ship landed itself. Our ship was so large that the beach had to be fairly secured before we could come in. And there's so many mines that we couldn't. Casualties are horrible. And this is what my duty was. And I fired a few 20 millimeter guns. I was the loader. I wasn't another fellow who was the aimer.
Okay.
And
now, what's life like aboard an LST?
well, aside from the fact that when you're anchored, that the ship rolls like hell when a rowboat goes by. It's flat bottom with no keel on it. It's kind of confined. You have to kind of get along with everyone. And we had our share of thieves. The guys stole things from each other all the time. But that was normal. You're gonna. We had a dining area in the stern, and the galley was in the stern. We'd get our chow and walk down the ladder and then eat in the crew's quarters down below. And the tables later on were used for operations during the D-Day landings. That was a bloody mess. You know, you sit there and eat, and your trays would slide around the blood. You know, it was a gory mess. Omaha Beach was one big faux pas, a big mistake, really. It was World War I, walking through the water head on into bullets coming at you. And it was, you know, wasn't too good.
What was the crew size for an LST?
Ours, well, it varied. We had 120, and we had plus the Foxy 29. I don't know if you never heard of them.
No.
They're a Navy medical team. A friend of mine, Chief Sardo, organized it. Master Chief Sardo. He's a multimillionaire from Virginia. He lives in Roanoke, I think. And he receives my newsletters. I publish a newsletter every month. And he organized the Foxy 29 and flew back and forth during its initial stages of formation. To form the group, he got the medical doctors. He promised the civilian medical doctors that he'd give them they'd graduate a year earlier if they went in. And this is how we organized that. And we had probably 2 medical doctors and 20 or 30 corpsmen on board, assigned to us before we hit D-Day. They came aboard, and I still in contact with most of these people.
So after the initial landing, your main mission would be as a hospital, as a hospital?
Yeah, after we landed the tanks, then we'd take aboard the casualties. Even before that, they came aboard. One Coast Guardsman lost his leg. He died. He got blown up in the air. But that was my first sight of war right there, up close. And their screams all night long. The tank deck was full of wounded. They just British and American colonel, Air Force colonel was brought aboard with shrapnel, and yeah, we had a variety of even German prisoners on the tank deck, and our duties were to feed them, and we go out and feed them, carry them aboard, and when it was time for us to go in, we landed at a place that supposedly cleared of mines, and it wasn't. And blew up the lead trucks of the 175th anti-tank outfit, and they got killed. You ever heard somebody burning alive? They screamed after they died. After a long time after they died, you could hear the screams. It just skeletons sat there, you pinned in their trucks. And we closed the bow doors. And later on, we came in when the tide was high enough where we could come in. We could see them, the skeletons sitting there in the trucks when the water come in. You know, cover them up. But that was a prelude to what was going to happen a few days later. Real bad.
What were the your officers like?
Well, there were a variety. We never had too much contact. When you say that in those days we had a lot of it was a caste system in World War II, and like the coloreds were stewards, and very few of us spoke to them. It was just an accepted fact that we weren't supposed to fraternize with them. But we did once in a while. I did. I had a few fellows who were friends. But and the officers they were God. You know, I was overawed. If an officer stopped and spoke to me, he looked through me. He didn't see me. I was a non-entity. But nevertheless, I stood there and basking in this great glory. An officer is talking to me, you know, and this is I was 18 years old.
Yeah.
You know, very impressionable.
First time away from home?
Yeah. Oh yeah. We got. We were attacked by submarines all the way over after we left Norfolk, and our ship rocked so much, so bad that you could see the bottoms of the hulls of the LSTs next to us. They were doing this, you know, during a storm. And during a storm, the German U-boats, we were advised, would never attack us because an errant torpedo would come back and hit them because of the rough waters. So we were fairly safe as long as it was rough, but we were sick to our stomach first time at sea, you know, vomiting. Everybody was, that place stunk with barf. And then on April 1st, 1944, we were just going through past the Rock of Gibraltar, and we were going to get attacked. We were advised that the German Wolfpack submarines lay up ahead of us, and they had bases in the Mediterranean, the Germans did, the Ju-88s and Dorniers, and he hit us on April Fool's Day and in great force. And
that's your first combat?
First combat, baptism of fire, April 1st, 1944. And let me tell you something, I could have changed my underwear 5 or 6 times. That was the truth. You know, I never imagined myself being a hero. I'm just not the type.
How big was the convoy you were in?
Oh, God, I have a list of it at home. It was quite a big convoy. It was probably 10 or 15 LSTs. There were the LCIs they used. They looked like submarines. In fact, up in Lake George, we used one for excursion cruiser ship, converted it, an LCI. Landing craft infantry, looked like a sub. And they were positioned in the outer parts of the convoy to take any torpedo that might come, because they were expendable. And a lot of them were. A lot of my friends died on those things on Omaha Beach. Coast Guard, all Coast Guard. Every damn one of them. Yeah, 92, 93, LCI, got hit. All in the U.S. Coast Guard with the casualties reported under the Navy. See, because I was in the Navy at the same time during World War II. And that was where the confusion began. And of course, we served on a Navy vessel, LST-27. It was built at Draver shipyards, and was launched as a U.S. Navy vessel. And of course, all the Coast Guards were incorporated into the Navy. You know, I didn't guard the vents at Holland Tunnel like a lot of fellows in the Coast Guard did, though.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. I'm reminded of this terrorism thing. This thing here. I was wondering if there's anybody down there guarding those vents over the Holland Tunnel right now. You know, they were patrolling them, so nobody would drop any you know, explosive or sabotage. That would be a hell of a thing. Yeah.
So the first attack was the Luftwaffe.
Yeah.
Greeted you.
Yeah.
How long did that last?
Well, we ended up almost destroying a British AA cruiser off our port side because our coxswain didn't like limeys, and he broke the pipe guard that lowered the 40 millimeters down, and we knocked off the radar mast. We filled that thing full of shrapnel. They complained later to the authorities after the raid was over. And these Dorniers and torpedo bombers would come real low. We had to shoot low. And I was screaming. I was terrified, hysterical, you know. I was scared. Yeah. I was scared. That's pure and simple. And God, and I almost lost my life during the raid when a bomb, a near miss, hit off our, I think it was off our port side, and the ship tipped very quickly. And I had this heavy magazine in my hands, about to put into the cannon, and hurled me this way, and I started to go through the cables into the dark Mediterranean. I never would have been rescued. When Tony Kistner, he was the aimer on the gun, reached out and grabbed the back of my Cape Cod life jacket and pulled me back, saved my life. You know, these things happened all the time, so similar things. We never thought too much of it, but I was scared. That was my baptism of fire. I said to myself, good God, wars like this, you know, I wasn't very favorably impressed, believe me. I wish I were, kind of at that time, I wish I was back home, you know, but like a lot of fellows did. But there are no heroes. I've never met a real hero who wasn't scared, really. I think the real heroes are the ones who are scared and still persevere and stay there and keep at their stations, like down the Trade Center with these firemen and the police down there. They were sure, they were frightened. Why, who the hell wasn't? But they still thought of somebody besides themselves. You see? And this is the way I am too, even today. You know, even today, I don't put myself over anyone. I never did.
So after the raid is over, where did you're going through Gibraltar? Where were you
we
heading?
were going to Bizerte, North Africa, and listen to this one. This is something you're not going to believe. It's in my book, Vagabonds of War. My brother gave me an address. He said, your uncle lives someplace in North Africa. Look him up if you get a chance. I didn't think too much of it. So we landed in Bizerte. We had to leave. We went into the small town. And my friend Bitzel made the mistake of giving this kid, this Arab kid, who had a little red fez on his head, give him a Spam sandwich. And that almost started a desert war. Oh yeah, they can't eat pork. It's a religion. Poor Bitzel didn't know that. The father slashed him, come at him with a knife and cut his arm open. We brought him up to a native doctor on the hill, and a native doctor, this is also in my book, and he spits on his hands. He says, sutures. This is sanitation at its best. He sewed up poor Bitzel. Bitzel was drunk anyway. He didn't know the difference. And finally, Bitzel got back, and a pharmacist's mate took a look at it, and it looked like the flap of a football had been burst. They took it all apart and resewed it. But this all over pork and Spam. So you see what the Arabs are all about, you know. It's they hear their religion pretty religiously. And well, anyway, I had to leave. I went into Mirz El Gabar, I think it was, or the name of the small Arab town. I brought back quite a few souvenirs. I bought a little wallet and stuff. And I noticed pork was hanging up, and carcasses, meat carcasses covered with flies. And, you know, I thought it was hair. There were flies, green bottle flies, like all over them. You know, God. And I approached this one kid. He was about 12 years old, an Arab kid, and he was a sharpshooter, let me tell you. He was a con man from way back. He says, me got sister, 12, no more virgin, no more. He say, she got lots of sailors, she got lots of soldiers. You give me money, I take you. I said, you little bastard. I said, you're a little pimp. You're selling your sister, and she's 12 years old. Yes, we eat. We eat, he says. I said, you go home, and I says, you tell her no more. Cut it out, or I go put her in jail, I said to him. He says, you don't got jail. He says, you, what do you call me? You swab jockey or something, he said. So I says, you know, he didn't see any rank on me, so he didn't. And I talked to him, and I said, do you know a man with wine, mixed wine? My uncle was supposed to be a wine merchant. And he says, wine, Italian? I says, yeah, Italian, yeah, Italian, yeah, on hill. I show you. He showed me. I walked up the road, and down the hill, it was a gradual hill, was a wagon, pulled by a donkey, and on top of the wagon was an old fella, we called him Mustache Pete's, big gray handlebar mustache, and he was yelling, cussing at the donkey, and I halted him, and I stopped him, and I spoke in kind of bad Italian. I could speak enough to get by. And he looked down at me, and he slid down the bunch of barrels and landed. He was an old man now, but he was in good shape, you know, from lifting those casks of wine. And he said, you Leone? I said, yeah, I'm Leone too. He says, well, how do you know, come to Giacomo, padre tu? So I says, Francisco Giuseppe Leone. Mamma mia, sono mio fratello. He's my brother, he said. And a small world, you know, he's hugging me. How many times would this happen? You know, it's like finding a needle in a haystack. And later on, we went up to his house, and we had wine and Italian bread and cheeses. And I had a friend of mine with me, too. We got pretty well shot, blasted out of our minds. And it was a nice place, so big wine casks. And it was nice. The only thing is, you know, I used their restroom. I had to go to the restroom, and while I was sitting there, I read the papers, and they were World War I newspapers cut up for toilet paper, and it showed a Fokker, I think it was D-7, a 3 triple-wing plane from the German Air Force from World War I, and I was intrigued by this, and this newspaper's so old, but I went to use it, and my fingers went through the paper, and I heard a lot of laughing, and I looked up and there's a window. Right in back of me, looking down, there's 2 or 3 kids pointing, laughing. They'd set me up, I guess, with those old newspapers. And but we had a little time. And so, you know, out of bad things, good things come sometimes. So it was an experience. We left Bizerte after that. We were there for a week or so. We dumped our LCT. We had an LCT on topside. You know one of those? You know what one of those are? It's a landing craft tank. It's wide. And what we did was let the water out of our port side ballast tanks, and it tipped, put the upper deck at an angle, and we chopped the cable holding the LCT down with an axe, and then slid on the greased beam and landed in the water. That's how we launched them. Oh. Yeah. And then we went to Oran after that, and I got I'm about the only fellow I think has ever went into a whorehouse and a virgin and came out a virgin. But you know, that was not my doing. We got raided by the shore patrol. We were in there, and I'd never been in a whorehouse in my life, and undeniably I was a virgin. And the lady, I picked the oldest lady there, and her husband was the mayor of Oran. I said, well, this is an honorable profession. His wife is a head madam. And she was going right at me like nothing, because she realized I was a virgin. And just as she climbed on the bed, there was a whistle. And police, she said. She jumped off and disappeared behind curtains, and I took off and opened this big wide window with shutters on it, and I jumped. And it was on the first floor, lucky, and I landed right in the Shore Patrol's Jeep. There was a lieutenant sitting there. He says, welcome aboard, sailor. That's the way my luck ran. But they took me down to headquarters. This was off limits where we were in Oran. I didn't know it. These 2 fellows from my ship set me up. So they brought me in there to get to take away my virginity, I guess, or something, whatever. And they were kind of irritated. After the war, I told Joe Borrielli, he lives in Schenectady, about it. He said, we wasted our money on you. I said, oh, yeah, you did. But we ended up in Oran, and then from there we took on another LCT on top, and set sail for England at that time.
How many LCTs could you carry?
One.
Just one?
Yeah, they're big. They're as big as this room from here to there. So yeah.
How did you get them on board?
A crane. Yeah, a crane lifted it up and set it down. Yeah.
So you went off to England?
Yep. And during the night, our Luftwaffe roared back and forth over our heads. Of course, there's a lot of overcast. The skies were overcast. They didn't see us too much, but you know, you're always on guard. We were in a state of condition 2, he called it, alert. And we landed in Swansea, Wales at the time. And we were there for a few days, then we went on to another port where we unloaded to Plymouth. We unloaded our LCT, and then we went to several other ports, and then we ended up in the in Falmouth. Mm-hmm. And it was from there we were part of Force B for D-Day, the backup force, Falmouth in England.
Mm-hmm. Did you get any leave in England?
Yeah, a lot of it.
What was that like?
Well, you know something? It was like being home. The English, in fact, I write to them all the time. I get so many letters. I'm an honorary commander in their organization. The English friend of mine is, this is the organization that's from England, LST, and they even give me a uniform, an honorary commander. It's a joke, and more or less, more than anything else. But I love the people. I got along good with them. They give me that.
Okay.
And I get their newsletter, the Kedge Hook, and it is probably more boring than a roll of toilet paper. Really, it's terrible. I offered to do their newsletter for them, but you know I didn't want to damage their ego. But I write to them. Stan Weber's a friend of mine. As a matter of fact, a little girl, a 15-year-old girl, used to follow me around in Falmouth before D-Day. And these two girls had stockings painted on their legs. They couldn't afford nylons. They drew a line down the back of their legs, and they had the rouge or some damn thing on there. And I tell this one girl, I said, "You call me when you're old enough." But I'd see her all the time, and she became a pest. You know, every time I come and show up in port, she'd follow me all over the place. I write to her today. She doesn't remember that, though. You know, Pam Harvey. Her name's Pam Harvey. Mm-hmm. But that's strange, you know. This is what, 2001, and I get letters from her all the time. I just got a letter from her. How we're planting her garden and doing this and that. Mm-hmm. And the British were my second family because, as you know, probably my mother and father died before I went in the service. And the crew became my second family, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And we were close. But then the English, they kind of adopted me, you know, and one elderly couple ran a pub, and I played darts with them. I used to hang around there and drink the warm beer, terrible, mild and bitters. And after the place closed, I'd stay behind and play darts with the old fellow, and he was a veteran from World War I, one arm. And he could shoot better darts than I could with two, you know. And one day the buzz bombs come over. First the V1s, you know, the pulse jets. And we couldn't figure out what the hell they were. I see this light coming overhead, and they hit Southampton with devastating results. With Falmouth got hit, and I went back to the pub, and there was a black wreath on the door. The elderly couple had been killed in their home. And I felt so bad, like I lost my mother and father all over again. And the British lived with this. Talk about the World Trade Center. These English people have lived in the Battle of Britain. They give me a medal for being there in the Battle of Britain. And I got the medal for walking drunk down the streets of London during an air raid because I didn't know any better, and going through the uncharted mine waters of the North Sea. We went up to accept the German surrender up in Oslo, Norway. We were part of a task force. And I was on the bow, and I realized that going through the minefield, that a blunt bow of an LST would never hit a mine, because it was so blunt it pushed the water aside, and the mines would go to either side of us toward the stern. And which was even more pitiful, the fellows that, with our old Springfield 03s trying to hit them on the horns to blow them up, they didn't hit one, and there were hundreds of them, never hit one. And I spent some good time up in Oslo. It was nice. I sat down with the port security officer, a German. He was no Nazi either. He was an intellectual. His father had fought in the Battle of Jutland, World War I. Yeah. And he spotted me right away, 18-year-old kid. You know, sit down, say. And I thought for a while he was homosexual or something, you know, but he kept putting his hand on my knee. But he wasn't. He was just a nice guy. And we got drunk, and before he left, he got up and screamed at me, and everybody in the cafe turned around and looked at him. He said, "You don't let this happen again," he said. "Don't let that, it's up to you now," he said. You see, big weight on my shoulder. And the last time I saw him was a convoy leaving Oslo, all the Germans. You want to see these fellows, the Germans going by with their Tiger tanks, everything, they're all fully armed. You know, they hadn't surrendered yet. Going by and with the flags, white flags of surrender, and bringing up the rear, I was sitting there drinking the beer. I had about half an hour left on my leave to go back to our ship. We were tied up at a wharf in Oslo. And lo and behold, I was watching this convoy. I was kind of mesmerized by the Germans. You know, these tanks are big. They shook the buildings. And bringing up the last was a Kubelwagen. You ever hear of that? Yeah, sitting in a Kubelwagen was an officer, two officers sitting there. One of them was the fellow that had the little sunflower thing on his cap, port security officer, and he waved. And I waved back, and I thought that was the most pitiful thing. That was so sad, because what was he going back to? They were going into Sweden, where they were going to be held, you know. And they turned in all their weapons over there and everything else. But this long convoy was headed towards Sweden. And walking in the streets were the Norwegian resistance fighters who would come out of the hills. And you want to see physical specimens. The men and women both, they were in excellent shape, my God. And the Germans never defeated them. They'd come out and they'd hit and run raids, and they drove the Germans nuts. They, sabotaged railroads. And during all this time, I remember the American University was on the hill. And there was an American professor, staff teaching English. And these children were the most well-mannered kids I've ever seen in my life. Pardon me, sir, and all that. Yeah, really good. And Oslo was quite a place. I have so many souvenirs from that, too. Yeah.
Did you do training in England for D-Day?
Well, a few of the guys, I was a sharpshooter, so the fellows that couldn't shoot as well, they came in later on board our ship. They sent them to a place in England for rifle practice. And but we trained at Slapton Sands. You probably heard of Operation Tiger. They sank. The E-boats come in and hit quite a few. I wasn't there. We weren't part of that, thank God. But they sneaked in. There was a combination of problems that enabled the enemy to come in like that, and they sank 2 or 3 LSTs with all the troops on. In fact, we lost more there than we did at D-Day, and just in a training exercise, and that was well covered up. But the thing is, along those beaches too in England, I talked to so many British people. In fact, the guy wrote a book about it, that they found pieces of American GIs or combat boots and part of the legs blown off. And eyewitnesses reported that they had mistakenly used live ammunition and hit the American soldiers in a training exercise. And they didn't report that. The bodies were transported by train in the night to a cemetery. So there's a book written about that.
Now we're coming up to D-Day.
Yeah.
What was your mission for D-Day?
Well, we were backup force. In case the first force couldn't make it, we were backing them up. And we started from Falmouth.
And you're loaded with?
We're loaded with the 175th Anti-Tank Company. In fact, there was a lieutenant from Utica that got killed, Kaiser. He got shot through the head.
Now, the Anti-Tank Company, what type of weapons did they?
They had 75 millimeter, I think, pretty sure on told behind the trucks.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, they weren't the best weapon, but this was what they had. And I think they had some heavier. I'm not sure what they were. I can't remember too much. But we had the big Jimmy trucks pulling them. The 2.5 with the cabs with the canvas top and the duals in the back.
Now, so you're the backup force.
Yeah.
What was your first impression seeing Normandy?
Smoke. It was just a thin film of smoke along the coastline. You couldn't see anything. You couldn't see anybody getting shot. I could hear airplanes overhead. And there was a lot of noise, LCVPs and, the roar of engines. But these were fires started by, I think, our rocket. We had LCIs that fired rockets, which were useless. They just started grass fires, that's all. They didn't kill any of the enemy, And the obscured division, so we couldn't hit anything. Then the British had observation planes for flight, for gun control, for the big ships that were anchored offshore. And we had orders not to shoot down any strange-looking planes because they were ours. And lo and behold, we shot down every damn one of them, really. And we were blind; we couldn't see no observation planes. And the bombers came over and they hit back. They were afraid to hit our own troops that were going in, so they bombed back in the swamps and back, and they blew a lot of holes in the field, and they accomplished nothing, really. The bunkers were still intact when our forces hit.
Now, what beach were you off of?
Omaha Beach.
Omaha Beach?
Yeah. Bloody Omaha. But,
Now, when did you go in?
I think what we did, we sent in first our small boats with, there was Rangers that were trapped on Point de Hall, and they needed 30 caliber ammunition, so we sent a boatload in along with a landing party with soldiers. The 175th, they went in with a couple of officers, and then we sent another LCPP in with more men, and of course the LST was too big to land, and it was too, they call it a large stationary target LST, and that it is, believe me. When it can do 10 knots maximum, it's easy to hit.
Right.
And they held off sending us in, so we did go in to take on casualties. We started taking on a lot of casualties, but the word was from the beach that we weren't going to make it. And the Germans were counterattacking, they were pushing us back into the water. And about that time, no one knew what to do. We got panicky, and the wounded kept coming back. The casualties were increasing, and when the smoke cleared, eventually, I guess we gotten in a little ways inland, and I saw that the church steeple there was no longer there. They apparently hit that, and LCI's on fire, and I didn't know it. Some of my friends were on Coast Guards, and they were dead. And we didn't go in until later, much later, about the 8th of June. And there were still isolated pockets of German resistance at the bluffs shooting at us. And of course the 88s were really zeroing in on the beach, hitting our supply dumps. And we went in, that's when our trucks hit the mine coming off of the ramp. Teller mine, they blew up in the flames, and bazooka shells flew all over the hull. I got a piece of shrapnel through my helmet, broke the skin. So, I dashed out on the beach. All that stuff's flying all over the place. Some guys said, look at that crazy guinea out there. I went out to get a helmet. I had that helmet the rest of the war. It had netting on it from one of the fellows that got blown up. And I went out and got the helmet, and there was machine gun bullets hitting the sand. They're all around me, and I got back. I leaned against the bulkhead where I was protected, and I just realized what a stupid thing that was to do, to go get a helmet. It's you do strange things. But we had a little Jewish deck officer, Surf, from Washington, and the other officers used to ridicule him. We had a lot of that anti-Semitism in those
Really?
days, and they picked on him, some of the other officers. They made him dance get on the table and dance, and made fun of him. And out of all the officers, we hit the beaches. The officer, our captain, was drunk, and he was singing Mersey Oaks and Oatsy Dokes. He was an older fellow, Mersey Oaks and Oatsy Dokes, and he had mattresses piled up around the conning tower for protection. Good idea. But this little guy here ran out and pulled the guy out of the wreck. It was burning, and everything was blowing up, and he was a hero. Yeah. This little Jewish officer, and boy, we had our esteem for him really grew after that. He was good.
Excuse me just a second. We got to change tape.
VA. They put a pneumosyphilogram. They put oxygen up my spine. I got awful sick. It cured the problem. I didn't have any more seizures. So they theorized the oxygen revived some dead cells probably in the brain, or damaged cells, whatever the case may be. But after that, I could walk into a room and remember everything like I do now. very vivid, everything in detail, so.
Now, this Jewish officer was picked on, you said.
Yes.
How is it being an Italian in the...
It was good. We took the jokes, you know. I grew up in the ghetto, and listen, you dumb guinea, and you nigger, and we got along good. You Polak jerk, and we got along good. We stood together against outsiders, as a matter of fact. But you had this potpourri, mixture of people, and if it wasn't for the Jewish bakers and deli owners, we wouldn't have had any economy. We wouldn't have survived, really. They baked the bread and put people to work. And, you know, I have a lot to say for them, you know, and it's like I do the Italians. And, of course, my favorite is Italian foods, but I love to cook Italian food.
Now, you're loading up wounded.
Yeah.
And where do you transport the wounded?
Well, what we did on the tank decks, they had these metal things like brackets that you put the litters on, and then when they were full, we put them on the deck, tank deck. And Germans were put there right along with the American casualties, right alongside each other. And then we'd transport them. We'd go back in a convoy to Southampton, England, and there was a hospital there. And I didn't know at the time, but Dr. Rhodes, the fellow who delivered two of our kids, was a staff officer there. Yeah, a small world. And we'd landed the Hard. We called it a Hard, H-A-R-D, a ramp. It was an artificial ramp they built out of concrete or something. And then there were British lorries would pull up and take off the wounded, the ambulances, and drive them to the base hospitals in Southampton. There were quite a number of those there. And of course there were a lot of hospitals all over the place. And then we would load, at the same time, after the casualties were taken off, we'd load troops on. And this is what we essentially did back and forth. And because the E-boats still operated, the German E-boats, they were fast. They'd come out of nowhere and they'd be gone.
Ever see one?
And nope. I was a bow lookout too. I never saw a sub either, but they were around us all the time. We heard the British corvettes, like with their code names, Stinker, the Stinker Chief, reporting, you know, U-boat, and we were at a heightened level of alertness. You know, condition 2, and then it was condition 1, I think, and you lived with this. You know, you slept, but you slept, but you didn't sleep. You know what I'm talking about? You had your shoes on and everything, and life jacket and the helmet there, and then we saw LSTs get hit. The LST 327 got torpedoed, their stern blown off. And her skipper became our skipper later on and took over our LST. But I think on June the 19th at Utah Beach, I think the most horrible thing in my life happened. And when I think of the World Trade Center, I think of, this is the book I'm writing, this, Patria, Pro Patria, our country, about that. And this was on June 19th, you know, and we were at Utah Beach, and Utah Beach was fairly an easy invasion. They got ashore easy. Theodore Roosevelt, I guess, was there. And of course, he died of a heart attack later. But they joined up with the troops, with the paratroopers. 82nd and 101st were landed at Saint Miguel Inglés inland, and they joined up with them. And we landed. We were bringing troops in on the area. The beach was secure. There were nothing. There was no enemy fire or anything. But there was something more ominous than that. There were mines still all over the place. And one of the worst storms in the history of the Channel hit about that time, and hit Omaha Beach and destroyed more landing craft and destroyed the
Mulberry Harbor?
the mulberries and the caissons. Did more damage than the enemy did on D-Day to our landing craft. They smashed everything. And a friend of mine now, Tracy Sugarman, he's written a book. It's in the library, My War. And he drew some sketches. He's quite an artist. He's a professional artist of what happened on June the 19th. We had started to come in to unload our troops, and our bow lookout yelled, you know, and we were, was an LCT wreck under us in the water. We got stuck on that. Then we started to raise our anchor, and that was stuck, and we couldn't move, so we signaled with our blinker light to the LST astern to come along us and take our place in line in the landing pattern. And when they did, it was LST 523, and they pulled up all on our starboard side. And I could look into the faces of these troops. It was 800th engineers lining up in that rough water. The LST was doing this back and forth, you know, rocking, and they were lining up and getting their chow. I said, what a hell of a time. Who the hell can eat? You know, it's rough. The waters were rough. And like slow motion, like watching those towers disintegrate and sink down the World Trade Center, two pieces of the LST rose up in the air all of a sudden. It was first of all, it was a mild explosion, muffled, then a boom after that, a tremendous explosion. Blew the two sections up in the air. And I saw something like 400 or 500 people vaporized, just gone. Bits of meat landed in the water next to us. And the stern kept going, the bow kept moving ahead under, you know. And what had happened, the fellas, we have orders when we abandon the ship to dog the doors down, you know, it would make the watertight compartments, so it would enable the ship to stay afloat longer. Apparently this is what they did in the bow, because I talked to a lot of these fellas. I correspond with them all the time. They had they said, I don't know why the hell we did it. We dogged the doors down. I said, well, it saved probably a few lives because the thing kept moving through the water. Matter of fact, days later it was still afloat. The British had to shoot it because it was a navigation hazard. But the stern went down faster, and it still had the tanks chained to the tank deck. And the Captain Cross, was hanging by one leg from the halyard. You believe that? He got blown up. Lived to tell about it. I got the action report home. I can't believe it. But how in the hell did he get down when the stern was sinking so fast? I can't understand it. I sent out questionnaires to all the survivors. Who incidentally, I found 12 that the War Department listed as killed in action. I found 12. Yeah, they read my book and they said, hey, I'm not dead. You know, and it serves a purpose, you see. But how did he get down? And so all my questionnaires have been returned. Most of the people that send me back the questionnaires are corpsmen, Navy corpsmen. They weren't even members of the crew that survived. So they were on top side, the corpsmen, where the crew that were part of the ship all died. And no one from the stern except one fella. And this is the saddest thing. I have a letter home where he's written. He's an old fella. His writing runs together, then it spreads out. You know, his head got blown open. So I imagine he was the one who was in the stern, one of those. He doesn't remember who rescued him. I know who rescued him. And I don't know. He went from one hospital ship to another. Finally ended up in England. And he's still, you can see with the letter he wrote to me, I have the letter home. This is terrible. It's a grim reminder of war, you know, the futility of war, nobody wins the damn things. And there's an old fella, he's remarried since he remarried one of his friends' wives that died. But his writing, he doesn't know where the hell he's at, poor guy, you know, and he's got a bad head wound. And he's probably one of the survivors of the stern. And the divers went down there, and they showed it on the History Channel, LST 523. The Sherman tanks are still chained to the deck. Yeah, they had that featured on the History Channel.
So you picked up the survivors on your ship?
Yeah. Well, no, we didn't pick up any of them. No, we were on our way into the beach unload then. And Tracy Sugarman, he was a lieutenant ensign at the time. He's a famous artist. He still illustrates for a lot of magazines. He's a hell of a nice guy. He was in charge of LCVPs, a bunch of LCVPs, small boat officer he was. And he went around trying to rescue. It was so rough you couldn't pull anybody aboard. It was hard. And one guy had a gaping wound right here in his chest. And he put some salt in there and tried to help me. He remembers, he had the name, I got the name on it, the dog tag on this fella. And they finally got him in the LCPP, but he was swearing. Tracy never swears, but who the hell are these guys that didn't put the lines on? They didn't put the lines in the LCVPs like they were supposed to. The certain amount of lines they used for rescuing people, they weren't there. So they had a hell of a time of trying to rescue people. A lot of them drowned, and the ocean, it was so rough. And Tracy wrote about that in his book. He lives in Connecticut, and Tracy does. But,
So how many trips did you make back and forth?
probably 60,
Really?
yeah, 60-something trips. Yeah.
Up until what time were you going back and forth to the beach?
Well, then when the war was over, and then when the war ended, we were part of an expeditionary force to Oslo to bring troops up there, and British troops were already up there. They had negotiating with the Germans who were surrendering at the time, but it was still a hotbed of resistance up there in Oslo. The slave laborers had broken out, and they were shooting in the park. They were when I was up in Oslo. One woman, she tipped her perambulator over and covered the carriage with her body. They were shooting in the park, and I guess the British got under control after a while. But in Oslo, one of them, I saw a puppet show, and the old fella, he was sort of a Gary Cooper kind of a fella, and he said, "You're the Coast Guard?" I said, "Yeah." "My God, you're the first ship up here since 1939. He said, "I was a member of the U.S. Merchant Marine." Yeah, and he was Norwegian, and he had a puppet show, and he ran. I got a free ticket to it. I still have it home, and the kids, and you know, this is something, you know, that I'm a romantic, you know, and I've written all my life. Always wanted to be a writer, nothing else, and I saw things a lot of the guys didn't. They were too busy screwing the broads, like they say, or making out and getting all kinds of disease, and I wasn't interested in that. Not that I've been married twice, and I got 4 kids to show that I'm not exactly a homosexual, but even if I were, the fact is that my interests, if you're in a strange place like England, or you're away from home, you want to take the advantage, you know, like at the Isle of Wight, of millionaires. That was a millionaires' playground in peacetime. And my God, we had a hell of a time there. We had our screws were bent on our LST. We went up on the sand, and the British engineers were working on them, and we had leave in the Isle of Wight. And they had these little straw thatched huts with storks sitting up near the chimneys. And they're big. These storks are big. The stork got big wings on them and everything. And a little theater they had, I remember. Then it was a pub. But I didn't follow the rest of the fellows. There was a few guys I hung around with, but I was interested in finding out, what is this Isle of Wight? How are the people like? You know, and this is what I did all the time I was over there, and I marked it in my diary. I ended up with one hell of a diary, you know, and this is how my books got started. One day I says, I could never write about the war. And one day somebody said to me, "Why don't you write about your experiences?" I said, "I don't know." So I looked in my old sea bag. I still have it home. And in the bottom was that old diary, which I still have. And of course, then as I read the diary, a lot of other details locked in, and I kind of embellished things too. You know, I'm not 18 years old anymore. This is another 18-year-old. That kid is a stranger to me. Who the hell is he? You know, and I know one thing: he was scared all the time. He was scared. You know, fear. You live with fear every day and night, and don't anybody tell you any different. That's it. But I'm nobody, you know. Pataki give me a medal. What's that? The cross. My son said, "What'd you get that for?" I said, "I don't really know. I just happen to be there, and that's about it." You know, really. You know, I'm no hero. I can't see myself going gung-ho like a few of my friends that got the Congressional Medal of Honor, and I marched them in a parade. And on D-Day, they saved our butts. They're the ones that went in with the Rangers, and his own brother got killed right on, unbeknownst to him, hit by a mortar round, and took out a whole company getting off an LCI. And he marched in the parade, and the Medal of Honor winners parade in Saratoga. We had her in '94, and the 50th anniversary of D-Day, and I was proud to march with them. If I died right there marching with those fellas, it would have served a useful purpose. I would have felt good about it, you know. And I'm a coward. You know, I'm not a hero. And this guy here, you know, he saw I had a medal they give us, the French government, you know, and I wear that all the time. It's on the 50th anniversary of D-Day. I guess they had a celebration at Omaha Beach, and Clinton was there. He sat right next to President Clinton, and a few friends of mine at the time. I couldn't make it because I think it was something like $2,000 or $3,000 or something. I couldn't afford it, you know, really. But I would have liked to have gone, you know. But I got that medal, and I wear it to church Sundays to pay homage to these fellows that burned alive off our ramp. And
Now, where'd you go after Oslo?
well, after Oslo, we came back, and we all knew we were going back to the States. And the LST-327 that got torpedoed, everyone thought she got mined, but after the war, a U-boat commander came forward and admitted he's the one that he sank it with an acoustical torpedo and blew the stern off of it. They'd welded the back of it, and it was going to be towed in the convoy back with us. And coincidentally, our skipper, Volton, the fellow singing Mersey Oats and Oaksy Dokes, was assigned to skipper that thing without an engine or anything. And the skipper, Gilleran, who was a war hero, became the skipper of our LST. Nice guy, too. He was Lieutenant Commander, Gilleran. And we sailed back to the States in convoy with this tug towing the 327. And we got back, we landed first in Brooklyn. We unloaded tanks at Ellis Island, of all places. And then we went around Cape Hatteras up there up to Massachusetts. Falmouth, what's that town that's right, that's Falmouth, isn't it? The Massachusetts, it's on the border of Massachusetts and New Hampshire, the submarine base there.
Portsmouth.
Portsmouth, okay. And that's where we spent a lot of time there, and had some good liberty. I went home for 30 days, rehabilitation leave, and then they locked up most of us. They put us in Chelsea Naval Hospital after we we left there and went to Boston, and then we got in Boston, psychiatrists came aboard a medical team, and one line there and one line there. I was they sent me to Chelsea Hospital because I'd hit an officer with a mop or something, a swab, but yeah, we were exploding, throwing oranges around the LST, setting fire to things, and what we were doing, letting off a lot of pressure. It's like a pressure cooker. And things were bad. That was a dark time in my life. So I had ended up in Chelsea Naval Hospital, got drunk and climbed to the top of the water tower, which I understand is still there, and they had ambulances and everything over there to get me down. They finally got me down. I'm afraid of heights too, but these are interesting times. And some society lady was bringing pets around to give to the servicemen. She brought a beautiful collie puppy, and I adopted that, and I hid it underneath the barracks we were in. And that would make noise every now and then during the inspection party, and I would kind of make my own noises, you know, and the officer would look at me, but he never caught wise. And I sent the dog home to my brother, and he didn't give his distemper shots, and it died. So that was the end of that. It was a beautiful dog, too. And then I got I went to Constitution Wharf. They wanted to have me stay on as an art editor. Then I drew a lot of cartoons and things. I won an award at the hospital for doing that. And I wanted to get out. And in frustration, I wrote to Gabriel Heater. I don't know if you ever heard of him. He was a columnist, a radio columnist at the time, like Walter Winchell was. And told him how long I was at Constitution Wharf, that's in Boston, the separation center, and they'd held up my discharge because, you know, I was a Navy and Coast Guard both. They didn't know what the hell to do with me. They sent me to the Fargo building, then they sent me to Constitution Wharf, and he got me out, and there was a big thing in the paper about it, and I got home, and then after I was discharged, my troubles really started, because I think everything began to break down, unwound in a big way. And my family looked at me, you know, it was my brother and sister-in-law, half-brother, and like I was some kind of a strange animal or something. And I brought back a nice carbine I was going to use for hunting deer, and it was broken down. It was in my sea bag, and I told my brother about it. And I could see them looking at each other, you know. And I came home one day and it disappeared. And they said 2 agents come by and they took the gun. They were going to stuff the barrel with some, you know. But I think they took it because they were afraid of me. They had a lot of reasons. I was in fights with the police, and you know, it was just. Finally, they committed me to Batavia Hospital, up the VA hospital, and that's where I got my high school degree and my diploma, equivalency diploma, and got admitted to Syracuse University from there as a result. And this ex-officer, a Navy officer, he twisted my arm a little bit to do it. And my marks were exceptionally high. I couldn't believe it. He said, you have a lot of potential, keep at it. But it was tough. It was a dark tunnel. I met my wife on Mount McGregor. That was the only veterans camp in New York State, and I ended up there. And this leg was still bad from that. I got hurt in a mine explosion, you know, on Omaha Beach. And I don't discuss that too much. I don't talk at great length about that because it was my own fault. You know, I was souvenir hunting like a bunch of other guys. And there was a bulldozer going by with sandbags piled up under the operator's feet. And there was all these signs all over, Achtung Minen. I said, what the hell are these things? I see the skull and crossbones. And I think, well, you know, that's death, right? I didn't pay too much attention to it. And I was standing on a piece of concrete that I guess one of the cruisers had hit. The big naval guns had hit and broken it off the bunker, and it was rocking like this back and forth. And the bulldozer stopped, and the guy yelled at me like this, you know, and I waved back. You know, I think he's being friendly, and the next minute I felt a breath of hot air, like I was being on an elevator going up in the air, and I got blown up. And I landed on my side, on this side here, and the 2 fellows were there. I guess they were engineers. They picked me up. He said, geez, that was quite a spill. You all right? And I was bleeding from my ears, my mouth. I had a concussion. Well, I was full of metal, little pieces of metal. I didn't even know. They were so small. For years after the war, even Mike saw me one time. I was shaving. I was like, awful itch in my chin. I went to pull it, and it was a piece of long, bright wire, like piano wire, but thinner, you know, very thin. It kept coming out. I said, how in the hell did I ever get in there? You know, really, it must have been in that mine. And I remember then that those 2 engineers said, you know, you're lucky. It was probably one of those ersatz mines. The French sabotaged a lot of these German mines, and they were malfunctioned a lot. What you got was a reduced charge, I think. Thank God. You know, I wouldn't have been here, because a lot of fellows got killed there that even when they were clearing the mines, they got killed, and he ended up in the cemetery himself on the hill. And to this day, it's numb. The leg is still numb. I got a drop foot out of it. When I walk it, my foot goes into the rug and it rolls it up. But the VA, if they increase I drew 100% for a long time from the VA, but if they kicked it back up, I'm on 0% right now. If they kicked it back up, I wouldn't have to pay anything toward my medicine, you know. So I felt kind of cheap about that. I said, how the hell with it? It's been 4 years. I haven't heard about my claim, and they're probably waiting for us to die. You know, there's a statistician like Eichmann up there saying, hey, yeah, wait a while, a couple of years. We'll save a lot of money for the VA, and that's a fact. We'll be gone, you see. So what, 1,200 of us are dying off a day now, I think it is. It's jumped up. See, and I'm a dinosaur right here. You're talking to history, right? Good God.
So you got your degree from Syracuse?
No, I never graduated. No, they took me out of college, matter of fact. They said that at the time my state of mind was not conducive to learning at the time. They took me out, and I sent me up to Mount McGregor. And I was a patient up there for a long time, got on the ball team. We played the jockeys from Saratoga, Eddie Arcaro and all those. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, I was pitching. I was a good pitcher in softball, I tell you. And I became one of the first librarians up there. I helped this old fella, and the Dewey Decimal Point and the decimal system, you know, and
What was Mount McGregor like?
well, it was a Metropolitan Life Insurance TB sanitarium one time, and George Hubbard was the superintendent. And they converted into the veterans, the only veterans rest camp in New York State. And we had Broadway shows come up there. They had a theater, and they had all kinds of medical facilities where I took my whirlpool treatment for my leg. And they had a couple lakes. There was a Lake Veneer. There was a lake in the back, had beautiful bass in there, and that thing way in the back in the woods. And then there was Grant's Cottage, General Grant's Cottage right there, and there was a Japanese lady who used to be who was the caretaker there, and she played the organ for church all the time. And then they had a big dining hall and a PX up there.
Now, how many people?
Work there, you mean, or patients?
Patients.
Oh God, I don't know. I must have 1,000 up there at the time. It was a lot. There were outlying buildings there with dormitories that they resided in, and then the closer in, they had the ones with the medical facilities. And I enjoyed the stay up there, and I think it saved me a lot. It saved a lot of guys, rest camp, because there was a need for it. Mm-hmm. I still think there's a need for it. A place where you can rehabilitate veterans, which the, you know.
About how long was that in business, do you know?
Oh, it wasn't that long. And I'll tell you what happened. Me and my big mouth, Governor Harriman was in at the time. Carmine DeSapio, Tammany Hall, Cold Fish. They were going to close down the camp. And I was being sort of a rabble-rouser and kind of a loose cannon. I said, they can't close this place down. And I happened to talk to George Hubbard, the superintendent. We talked, you know, casual acquaintance, and he said, "Why don't you do something about it, you know?" And because his job was on the line, right? I figured out later on. So what I did, I wrote this agency and that, the American Legion. There were friends of mine that were helicopter pilots, airplane pilots, and ex-veterans, and all across the state. It became a network after a while, and they put pressure on them. And I went up, my picture was in the paper someplace, I don't remember, shaking hands with Carmine DeSapio, who was a cold fish. His hand reminded me of a cadaver's. You know, it's cold, no feeling. And Governor Harriman says, we're going to keep the place open, all right, for another year. So then I went to California after that, and I read in the paper they closed it down. But that's a shame because the veterans needed that place up there.
About when was that? When did they close it?
1949,
Really?
50.
So it wasn't...
Wasn't open that long, a couple of years, maybe 2 or 3 years. They had, Wilton was booming down below, though. They pumped a lot of money into that settlement down there, Wilton, New York, and, you know, bar rooms. In fact, the veterans, they'd spend all their pension checks when they get them every month just on booze. You know, they're drunk all the time. You know, and the people in Wilton hated the veterans as a result. You know, they knocked up all their women down there. This was a bad scene at the time. And when you mix people like that together from all over, you know, you're going to have problems, let's face it. And, but to me, it saved my hide, really. You know, it got me back into the civilian life. I met my wife there, and she'd come to watch me play ball, I guess. Some friend of hers told her about me and all that. And we got together, and it was... that helped me a lot. It took me a few years before I could get everything out of my system, though. I'd wake up screaming at night, and mostly I still bother me with those fellows that got burned alive, though. I can still hear them screaming. Damn it, I'm 76 years old, and I can't. It doesn't occupy my nights. I don't have nightmares all the time, but every once in a while I'll think about them, and I can hear them scream, and that's it. And I've learned to control all that. This is why I've written. It's a catharsis. I talked to a psychiatrist one time. She said, what you're doing, Tony, is letting it all out when you write. Every time you write, it's a mental catharsis for you, and it's doing you good. And so every time I write, I play music, background music. If I'm writing about the Germans, I'll play Wagner. I'll put the headphones on. You know, I get into the mood. I have my own background music, and I'm making a movie every time I do this. But my books will never see the light of day, because the general public will never get to read them, I don't think. I don't have the finances to publish these books. I wish
Now,
I did.
what did you end up doing after, you said you went to California?
Yeah, and I worked out there, and after this business with the photographic memory thing, I went to El Camino College, junior college, and then I worked as an engineer for Northrop when I signed up in their school, and Northrop Aeronautical College, and I became an engineer. I worked on the T-38 trainer and a Snark missile, that's what it was. And I got a lot of awards, design awards, and in fact, I worked for GE a long time before that on that missile thing there. And I got so many awards. I got more money, I guess, in suggestions than I did from my wages. But this was happening in my mind at that time, you see. So, you know, and I met Dr. von Braun, too, of all people. You know,
What was he like?
He was no Nazi. He's a nice, well-mannered, gentle fellow. They made a movie of him, Reach for the Stars, of his life. And of course, they started, this was before Cape Canaveral. This was at the Red Sands Arsenal and White Sands, New Mexico, and all that. But anyway, based on that experience, and I could hold my own with any engineer. And their German engineers were much more proficient than our engineers were, I'll tell you, in the German from Pinamon. And I learned a lot from them. And I absorbed all this. And of course, when I worked for Northrop, I made good money. Then I started the Lincoln Press, Lincoln Digest, the publishing company, and we published just about all of John F. Kennedy's propaganda when he ran for president. We made some good money out there. This was a long time ago. And we had 2 Cadillac convertibles sitting in our driveway, and our building was right there. We owned the place, and we made big money, and you know, and the money never. I never thought of the money really. I just didn't. I was doing something I liked to do, and the publishing company never took off because my partner took off. The redhead from Vegas, and he had the money, and he was the printer, and so that ended that. All the best laid plans of mice and men, you know.
That's right. How would you summarize your military career?
Well, since I am the unofficial recruiting officer for the Coast Guard Reserve locally, I'll tell you something, right? They're the best outfit there is, the Coast Guard, really. And I would advise anybody to go in the service to go in the Coast Guard. Because, you know, you save lives. You're out there saving lives, risking their lives to save other people's lives. I'm so strictly anti-war, and this is why I write these damn books. I'm trying to convince people that war is futile. It's just a senseless waste of time. And Bin Laden would get the wind of that, I hope. But you know, you never will. He's got these people are all alike. Hitler was the same. They're fanatics, and I, for one, think the Muslim world won't fall for his fanaticism. They're not. I think most of the Muslims aren't like that. And I, myself, as far as for guys going into service, they got going into service now is such a technical thing in the military. Now you learn so much. My computer was serviced recently over here on Glen Street, Advanced Technologies, and the fella in there had a tattoo, U.S. Navy. And I said, this guy's he didn't look like much to me, you know. He knew more about computers than I ever imagined, you know. The guy was sharp. He learned his trade in the Navy. And this is what's happening now. These people in there. A lady who was a bomber pilot that bombed Afghanistan on CNN. They were interviewing her. Yeah, the women, and that must go against their grain. The Afghanistan, the way they whip the women with the sticks, and there's a woman bombing them. You know, and the Taliban must be really getting sick over that. So yeah, but the military, I go back in now. You know, despite what I've been through, I don't think I've been through a hell of a lot compared to a lot of guys. But you know, to me it was a lot because I was a sensitive guy. And I might have exaggerated everything, and over-exaggerated and overreacted, what I'm trying to say, and ended up a mental case. You know, I got a mental discharge, I think, in the leg, the disability, and the loss of hearing from the concussion. And They were gonna give me a court-martial because of that, incidentally. They dismissed that, being off limits, I deserted my post. Everybody left, they wanted to look for souvenirs. Yeah, they said somebody could have been killed on account of you, what you did to yourself, you won't even get an APC, the captain said to me. Back to duty, and that's it. He was mean, boy. He was the meanest son of a gun I ever met. But he was right. You know, I shouldn't have been there, so what the hell are you gonna do? No, that's war.
Well, thank you very much, Tony.
Well,
You did a great
you're
job.
welcome.
We appreciate it.
I hope so, but, you know, it's, you begin to talk and you're lost in your own echo sometimes because you feel it's, who the hell was that 18-year-old? I don't know him. And I have to look at my diary, and I have so much material at home, you wouldn't believe it, you know. And you go with it. I'm 76 right now. I've had cancer. I had a heart attack at the end of August. And you know something? It didn't faze me. I can't understand why I even had a heart attack. I lay over on my left side, and I got a dull pain. I started getting sweaty, and I realized there was something wrong. So I went over and tapped my wife on the shoulder. I said, I think I'm having a heart attack. I went over to my little boxer puppy laying on the couch. I says, I think I'm having a heart attack. He opened one eye and looked at me. He wasn't interested in listening. And the other dog, my old dog, he lifted his head up as if to say, hey, go back to bed. You got gas on your stomach or something, you know. So I waited for my friend. He was in the rescue squad to pick me up, and he shoves a nitro onto my tongue, which I didn't need. Because once I lay on my back, I was okay. I didn't know that. There's something about laying on my left side. So I got up in the hospital, and they put me on sensors, and out in the hall, they showed on the screen, on a monitor, all the patients and what was going on in their hearts. And they come running into my room. I laid on my ruler on my left side, and they come running here, Mr. Leone, get back on your back. So what the hell would cause that, you know? And they never told me what would cause that. They said, just don't sleep on your left side. So I take medicine to sleep on my right side now. I said, you figure that out. See, this is